What's up guys, and welcome to my YouTube channel. So this video is long overdue and it is a little windy, so please bear with me. I'm also recording this on my phone, so if it looks like I'm looking off into the distance, it's because I'm looking at myself on my phone. But anyways, so this is going to be my full in-depth review of Fourth Wing. So with that being said, this will be full of spoilers, so if you have not read this book yet, please do not watch this video. Unless you just want to know everything that happens, that's fine. So starting from the beginning, we have our main character, Violet, and Violet is the daughter of General Sorrengail. I'm not sure how to pronounce that correctly, but General Sorrengail. And when Violet started, she had every single intent to be a part of the Scribe Quadrant. Violet, her brother was also a writer, and after Violet's brother Brennan passed away, her mother forced her to join the Writer's Quadrant instead of the Scribe Quadrant, which Violet's father passed away, kind of being her mentor and teaching her everything there is to know about being a part of the Scribe Quadrant. Then you have Dane, which is Violet's best friend. They grew up together, they had been best friends for years. And then there's Xaden Ryerson, which Xaden and Violet at the beginning of the book start out as enemies because Violet's mother killed Xaden's father. So throughout the whole book, Xaden was kind of plotting to kill Violet in a sense, and throughout the whole book, Dane was also begging Violet to leave the Writer's Quadrant and to go to the Scribe Quadrant without her mother knowing. Violet obviously didn't like how pushy Dane was being and how controlling he was being, and neither did I. It kind of struck me at first. When I first started the book, I had every ounce of me wanting Dane and Violet together until he started kind of telling her that she, really wasn't strong enough physically or mentally to be a writer. Violet took every opportunity to prove Dane wrong, right? And she did, obviously. So Violet ended up getting past the first couple of challenges, right? And then we make it to threshing, but the cadets bond their dragons. Now, some cadets do not bond dragons, and then they have to wait a whole extra year to see if they bond a dragon that year. But when you come to threshing, they walked around and felt out the dragons. If the dragons like you and they like your vibe per se, they will pick you and you will be chosen, right? They will bond you. Throughout the entire threshing process, I thought that Violet was going to bond with the golden dragon. Now when you read the book, you will know. I'm not going to mention her name yet, but there's a golden dragon, and when she starts getting brought up and introduced, you're like, oh yeah, like you get that gut feeling and you're like, Violet is going to bond with her because she's not supposed to bond, right? The golden dragon was not supposed to bond. So not only did Violet bond with the golden dragon, Violet also bonded with another dragon, and his name was, I believe, Taran, or Taran. I'm not, like I said, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering any names, but she bonded with two dragons. Now, I don't think that had ever happened before, so it became kind of a talk, right? And Taran ended up being one of the most powerful dragons there was at Basgiath. On top of that, Taran was mated to Xaden's dragon. So with them being mated, their dragons being mated, Xaden and Violet's safety became intertwined. So if anything happened to Xaden, then it would also happen to Violet per se, and vice versa. So they had to work together to keep each other safe, because if one died, the other died. So it's kind of what struck their love story to start. This is one of the greatest enemies to lovers books that I have ever read. I am very utterly obsessed with the character development in this book. It was perfect. It really was perfect. So once Violet bonded those two dragons and Xaden and Violet's safety became paired, Xaden then started to teach Violet how to fight, because she was on the smaller scale of her size. So she couldn't do things that other people could do, other riders could do. She wasn't capable, her body type wasn't like others. She was smaller. So Xaden taught her how to fight for her size, and he committed to that. He did. He committed. He taught her how to fight. He ended up making her a saddle for Taran because she couldn't stay seated on him. He was a big dragon. She was small. It was a little bit harder for her. I can't pronounce Xaden's dragon's name. I'm gonna call her S. So when Taran and S did things, right, it made Xaden and Violet also feel those things, if you know what I mean. Like the urge and the tension, it was very prominent when S and Taran did sexual things. So Xaden had to teach Violet how to stop the urges and to ground herself, right? And then all in the midst of doing that, he basically says fuck it, puts his hands up, you know, and he kisses Violet. And that is where it all begins. So they are kissing and all of these things, right? They didn't go all the way this time, but he ends up stopping and telling her that you know, these aren't your feelings, these are the dragon's feelings, and you don't really want to do this, you know, all of those things, basically saying like it's not right because this isn't how you feel. And he knew that, so he felt wrong basically taking advantage of that. So eventually, though, Violet lets him know that she really did want to do those things, and it wasn't just the dragon, and that she had feelings for him and all of these things. So they ended up taking it all away. So then we round after the first time they were intimate. He basically tried to deny any feelings with Violet. Okay, she was all for it, and she knew that he had feelings for her, and she knew that she had feelings for him as well. And so it became a little game, and they started talking to each other telepathically and teasing each other telepathically. You just know while reading that they are completely in love. Like you just know. You just can feel it while you're reading, and you can visualize it while you're reading. And I will say, this is one book that for sure will put you in a different realm while you're reading. I felt like I was at Basgai the entire time I was reading this book until I finished. She ends up having a talk with him the night of the celebration of Xaden's dad's death. And there was a celebration going on, a little party with Liam ended up taking Violet because Xaden had basically hired Liam to make sure that nothing happened to Violet, to keep her safe. So the night of that celebration, Xaden was on the parapet, and Violet also went out there in a skirt, and it was freezing, and I think that's when he really was like, okay, like I can't deny these feelings anymore for her. He ended up taking her back because he didn't want her to get hurt. and they ended up kissing again. He takes her to his room. I believe they had sex again. So she ends up telling him, you know, I know that you have feelings for me, or you wouldn't have done all of these things for me, right? Like, this isn't just because you're worried about my safety because of your safety. You're worried about my safety because you're in love with me, right? And he didn't say no. He didn't deny it at this point. And she ends up asking, you know, is there someone else? And he said, no, there's only you. And it was just perfect. And so we get to the point of the book where they get called, I believe it was the same night that they agreed to be in a relationship and agreed that they do have feelings for each other, and all of these things. They started getting intimate. They got called to the field the same night for the last war game. Xaden ran over to Violet, basically said, I need you to come with me. And he was going to Athebyne, which turns out to be a whole different sticky situation there towards the end of the book. But she ended up talking to Dain, and Dain and Xaden were kind of arguing back and forth, and he said, you know, Dain said, you know, she would be a lot safer here, and Xaden said no. So towards the middle of the book, Dain ended up kissing Violet, and Violet didn't feel anything, and that's kind of when you knew that Violet really wasn't feeling Dain anymore, or at all. And that's when you really were like, okay, like, her and Xaden, they have to get together. At this point, when they're arguing about whether Violet is going to go to Athebyne with Xaden, Violet said, you don't even have to argue. If you want me to go, I'll go. And then Dain knew that Xaden and Violet were going to be together. He said, you choose Xaden out of all people, and she said yes. And that's how that ended, right? So then they go to Athebyne. They started fighting all of these venom and other things that were very dangerous, and it ended up being a trap because Dain used his power to read her mind of the things that Xaden had told her in confidentiality, and basically Dain figured out what Xaden was doing and things like that. So when they got there, they didn't have any weapons because Dain basically took them, like got them taken. So they had to fight with what they had, their knives and things like that. So Xaden ended up working with the enemies, and that struck Violet because she said, you know, you've lied to me this entire time. What have you told me that was true? Like, how much other things are you lying about? And, you know, he tried to argue it and say, no, our feelings are true. Everything that I've told you, I've never lied to you. I just didn't tell you, right? Which is kind of the same thing. He ended up explaining everything that was going on, that basically Basgiath was supposed to be fighting it, but they chose to do nothing. And she ends up saying, why would they do nothing, you know? And she agreed to fight it with them, okay? She's still mad at Xaden for lying and not telling her the complete truth and not telling her everything, but she still decides that what he's doing is the right decision, and he brought her because of her powers and obviously because he loves her, right? And she agreed. She said, okay, if you want to fight this thing, let's do it. So they ended up fighting it. Violet got stabbed by a venom, and it had poison. So she got poisoned and she was about to die. You hear Xaden talking in the background, you know, what are we gonna do? We don't have enough time to go back to Basgiath and all of these things. So they end up at this place, at this house. You don't really know what it is. You don't know if it's a doctor's office. You don't know if it's a house. You don't know really much about it. She's arguing with Xaden because he lied to her. He's still mad. She said, you know, I agreed to do these things with you, but it doesn't mean I trust you. And he basically said, I will do whatever it takes to earn your trust back, whatever it takes. And then there's a knock at the door, and this is where the plot twist happens. So you think the whole time that the plot twist was Xaden working with the enemies, and it turns out that he was actually doing the correct thing and that Basgiath was actually doing the wrong thing. Then there's a knock at the door, and Violet opens the door, and it was her brother Brennan in the doorway. The entire 6 years that everyone thought that Brennan was dead, he was alive, and he was basically working with Xaden. So Xaden knew the entire time that he was alive, but he couldn't say anything because it would ruin what they were doing. That's basically how the book ends, is she opens the door and it's her brother Brennan, and that's how the book ends. Now I will say that plot twist really knocked me on my ass. It did, it really knocked me on my ass, and the book itself broke my heart because you just wanted it to end on a good note, and it kind of didn't. Like, it did, but it didn't. When you get sucked into the book, you don't care about her brother. Like, when I ended the book, I don't care that he's alive. That does nothing for me. I was in it for like Violet and Xaden's love story, but when the book ended, she was mad at Xaden, and now he's kind of in it for the long haul to win her trust back. And I do believe that he will do whatever it takes to win her trust back. The book as a whole, I give it 5 stars. Now for me, it started out a little slow because it always takes me a second to jump into things, and if the tension doesn't start right off the bat-ish, then it takes me a second. But once I hit that threshold of like, ooh, I think it's when Dane kissed Violet and Violet realized that there was no feelings there. I was like, okay, then it's Xaden for sure. And that's kind of when I got sucked in, and I was like, okay, I can't stop reading this until Violet and Xaden get together. And that's exactly what I did. So it was the best book I've ever read so far. I haven't read many books yet, but this book is just so good. And if you love, you know, the enemies to lovers tension and romance, there's so much going on in this book, and it's just so freaking good. And I feel like you guys would love it if that's the type of books that you're interested in. Once I finish Iron Flame, I will also be uploading a more in-depth, detailed review. Now it's going to be kind of similar. I'm going to give a pretty long recap of what happened in the book and everything that I did and didn't like. I love the fact that Dane kissed Violet. Now let me tell you why. The way that Rebecca Yarros put that in there, it's because when it starts, you think that Dane and Violet are going to get together. You think it's the ultimate love story where they've been best friends for years, and you know, of course they have to be together. When they kissed and she felt nothing, that's when it really gets you like, hold on. And yeah, so that was a little confusing for me, but I love that she put it in there because it confuses you, because you're like, wait, that was not supposed to happen like that, right? And then it keeps you questioning, like, okay, then who is Violet supposed to be with? So yeah, I love that she put it in there. I don't like the vibe that Violet's mother gave off. I don't know why. I think it was just the fact that she was just so in tune with her job that she didn't really care. Violet obviously said towards the end of the book, she goes, you know, my parents sacrificed Brennan, well, her mother sacrificed Brennan's life to keep the secret of the war going on outside or on the borders of Basgiath, right? So that just baffles me. So this entire time, her friends, the marked ones, knew that Brennan was alive, so she felt the utter betrayal by all of her friends. I do love the fact that Violet and Xaden teased each other and kind of messed around and made jokes telepathically, because it just made it so much more interesting, and it just put that like knot in your stomach where you're like, if they don't give in to that urge, I'm gonna be so upset. And obviously they did, and it was exactly what everybody wanted it to be, right? And I loved how protective he was of her. even when he hated her, he was still so protective of her. I am just so excited to read the second book, and I know that there's a lot of controversy on it, but I'm gonna read it anyways, whether I like it, whether it's slow. I'm gonna finish the book regardless. I have to now at this point. I'm invested. So yeah, if you guys are not following me on TikTok, it will be down in the description below. But with that being said, this is going to be wrapping up my full detailed review. So yeah, I hope everyone has a great day and Merry Christmas. Bye.